Well, I like the stuff you were saying about using the Mac App Store. That certainly fits my view of
Well,
things.
I think anytime somebody else is, I think anytime anybody's willing to do the work for you, that's a good time to go. It really is.
Yeah.
Everybody, let me introduce this gentleman in case you've never run across his website. This is Gary Rosenzweig. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Rosenzweig.
Rosenzweig. Okay, all right.
Yeah, you got
and
it.
Gary has, I don't know how many years I've been a patron, I don't know, for 2 or 3 years, and a subscriber for probably 5. But you can get on his subscription list. And you come out with these about once a week, don't you, with tricks and tips, something like that?
Yeah, I do 5 videos a week, and the newsletter comes out every Thursday.
And what's the contact information?
macmost.com.
And they're the greatest.
I agree.
Thanks.
Gary, did you say that you're on Patreon?
Yeah, I've got a Patreon campaign. About a year ago, I got rid of ads off of the website, and it's Patreon now. So it's an ad-free website.
Okay, I'll go look for it. Thanks.
Gary, why don't you go ahead and take over. Just go ahead and grab the share screen and click on the desktop and go for it.
Cool. I'm going to share my desktop here.
And guys, if we can keep if you can keep yourself muted, if you got a question, you can either pop a hand up or uncheck a mute and ask away, but then mute yourself afterwards so we don't get ringing phones or barking dogs or screaming spouses.
So you guys can see my screen now, right?
Yes, back security.
Yep, yes, we can see it.
Okay, well, I mean, I could talk about just about anything,
yes,
but, we decided a good topic, and a topic I'd like to talk about is, the basic Mac app, but, the type of security that as regular Mac users, we all need to know about and use. And, the good news is that most of you are probably doing a lot of this stuff already. So hopefully you're just going to be nodding your head and say, yeah, I'm already doing that and everything, but maybe you'll get some extra tips or some insight from what I'm presenting. So I don't want to take up all my time with this because I want to have plenty of time for questions and answers. So I've got a keynote deck here that is pretty long, but it's kind of like the most important stuff first, and we can get see how much stuff I get through for a little while, and then we can kind of go into questions and answers at some point midway. Sound good? All right. So I really break up security into 3 different categories. There's online password security, malware, and data loss. And a lot of people, when they think of security, they really jump right to the malware stuff. And, malware is probably the least of those 3 that you need to worry about. It's easiest to take care of, but people really neglect their passwords and they neglect the data loss part of it, which is, in other words, they don't back up. So, but I'll start with passwords here. So when thinking about online passwords, it's important to understand, like, why should you have good? Somebody tries to steal your password. Because a lot of people understand that. They think it's like the movies, where there's one guy sitting in a basement, like in Eastern Europe, and they're specifically decided that evening to target you and break into your Facebook account or something. And that's not reality. That's not how it really works. What really happens is there are these bots out there, and bots are just software applications that are installed on computers that try to break in to accounts like Facebook accounts, Amazon accounts, your online banking account, or your iCloud account. So they pick one of these sites and say they're going to try to attack Amazon tonight. And they pick a random ID. Now, you probably noticed that user IDs everywhere are basically email addresses, right? It's your email address is your user ID. Everybody's email address is public. If you've ever received a piece of spam email, that means that it's out there. Your email address is out there. So it's easy for them to pick a random email address that's a real email address. Then they pick a password. And they have lists and lists of common passwords, of variations on common passwords, of algorithms that try to make up passwords that people use all the time. And they try to hit, like, if it's going to be Amazon, they try to take a random ID and a random password. They try it. If it doesn't work, they try another one. And the software can try millions of these. So they're not interested in hitting you. They're interested in getting, say, 1,000 accounts that night. They go to sleep, they have this bot running, and they want to wake up in the morning and get 1,000 accounts that they can then sell off to some crime syndicate or something and say, here's 1,000 compromised Amazon accounts or Facebook accounts or iCloud accounts. And the idea is that if you have a weak password, eventually one of these bots running on one of these computers by one of these bad players somewhere in the world is going to break into one of your accounts. and then you're compromised. Then somebody used your Facebook account or is logged onto your bank account, transferring money or whatever. So you want to protect against that by having a strong password. Another way they get into your accounts is they hack a non-important account. So for instance, say you use the same password over and over again because it's easy to remember. You have this cool password you thought of and you use it at Amazon, at iCloud, at wherever. Then one day you log into a site that's not important. Say it's like a news site or something, and they want you to have an ID. So you log in with your email address, then you use the same password used everywhere else, so you don't have to remember it. Well, that minor site that's really not that important to you is then hacked, and they might not even know it because their security is so low. All those passwords and IDs are stolen, and the first thing that they do with those passwords and IDs is they try them at iCloud, and they try them at Google, and they try them at Amazon, try them everywhere, because a lot of them are going to be the same IDs and passwords. So now they can compromise all these accounts because the stolen passwords from another site that wasn't even important. And the third way, probably the most common way for them to steal a password, is they simply ask you. All over the world, all the time, constantly, scammers are just asking people for their passwords. And they're doing this in tricky ways. And people just hand them over. And we'll look at that. It's called phishing. And it's basically trying to just get you to hand your password over. And it doesn't require any of this hacking kind of stuff. Doesn't require computer skills. It just requires people skills, and not even very good people skills. You can, if you ask 1 million people in a really bad way to give them, for them to give you their password, you're going to get a few people that do it. So that's how they get your passwords. And the way to protect against it is to use strong passwords. So let's understand what strong passwords mean by looking at weak passwords. So obviously, weak passwords are things like real words. And these are actually some of the most common passwords used. So there's hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people using these 10 passwords for accounts right now all over the place. So if you were to try random email addresses and one of these 10 passwords, it wouldn't be long before you actually broke into somebody's Facebook account or something. Also, any variations. So a lot of people think they're really smart and using a 0 instead of an O, or 1 instead of an L, even an exclamation point instead of an I, spelling something a little wrong or something like that. But if you can think of it, then other people have thought of it, and then it's ended up on a list, or the thing you're using, like substituting a 5 for an S, that's ended up in some sort of algorithm, and somebody's trying that. So none of this stuff makes any password really any stronger. Names and places, of course, are used all the time for passwords. And dates in any format. A lot of people use dates, think they're being clever by using a weird format like dots instead of slashes, or the first letter of the name of the month or something like that. And all of these different formats, there's thousands of them. Somebody else is using them too. They've thought of them, they put them in the algorithm, and they're trying passwords that match dates that are in odd formats. And anything easy to type, of course, is going to be easily compromised. So here's what not to use. Don't use any passwords you've ever used before. Don't use passwords that other people have used before. Well, how do you know what other people have used before? Well, if it's a regular word, or you think you're being clever by putting some words together or substituting numbers for letters, probably somebody else has done that, which means it's been used before, which means you shouldn't use it. And anything it's like a phrase from a movie, a book, or anything, some strange name from some fantasy or sci-fi book, somebody else has used it as a password. Anything that exists somewhere else. If you could search for your password, and you shouldn't, of course, but if you search for your password and you think it has a chance of coming up in Google with even one hit, then it's something you should. So far?
Yep.
Good? Okay. Am I going too fast, too slow?
Nope.
Good? Okay. So what's a strong password? Well, a strong password, it's got to be completely randomly generated, which means you can't think of it. It can't come out of your brain, because our brains are not good at random stuff. Computers got to come up with it. So it's got to use letters, numbers, and more, because only 26 letters is adding symbols. It adds a lot more variance, makes it a lot harder for an algorithm to guess a password. Having it be long, not 6 characters, maybe not even 8, something like 13, 15 characters is better, and completely unique. So you've never used it before, you're never going to use it again, nobody else is using it. And here's a very important thing. A lot of people, even people that get this and say, I'm going to have a completely randomly generated password by my computer, they'll still go ahead and use that same password for Facebook and iCloud and Gmail and everything. You can never use the same password twice, because as soon as you start using the same password multiple times, all it takes is one of those services to be compromised, and then people will try that password at another service. So some, online shopping sites compromised, your password's taken from there, and now people can get to your email account, even though there's no connection between them. So how to get a strong password? There's really only one way to do it. You have to do random password generation, And the best thing is you don't have to even remember these. You never have to go and like write, type them in or anything. Use something called password managers. And password managers can be things like 1Password or LastPass, which have been around for a long time. But now macOS and iOS has one built in. It's called, it's part of Keychain, which has been around for a while. But now Safari makes it really easy for you. I can even switch over to, here I am in Twitter. Okay, so here I am in Twitter, and I'm going to create a new account, and I can add full name, put my email address, which will be my ID. And then when I go to password, you can see Safari suggests a password. You've probably seen this come up before. This is a randomly generated password that your Mac has created. And use this, and it's going to be that strong password. It's going to be random. It's going to be unique. And it's going to basically be unguessable. And you can see here, you take away those dashes, which just make it easier for you to read. It's 12 characters long.
Oh, so the dashes aren't actually part of the password.
Well, they are, but if somebody knew I was a Mac guy or could guess, they could guess, hey, he's probably using keychain passwords. So that means it's 3 characters dash, 3 characters dash. They know the dashes are there. So the dashes don't really add any security to it.
They're like you said, they're just to make it easier for us to read.
Right, exactly. It doesn't take any extra effort to really type those dashes. It's easy. So it's just an easier way. If it was all 12 characters mashed together and you needed to actually type that password in some instance, it would be really hard. But having those dashes makes it easier. Doesn't make it any more secure. It just makes it a little easier. It's the 12 random characters that are important. And that's basically how you come up with that. The one thing on top of all of that is there is a better system, and you should use it when possible, and it's called two-factor authentication. And all the big players use it. Apple uses it with your Apple ID. Facebook uses it. Twitter will use it. Google will use it for your Gmail account. And the way two-factor works is you still have a password, and it should still be a strong password. But even if somebody were to get that password from you, they had your ID and they had your password, say it was to your iCloud account, and they were to sit down at a computer in Eastern Europe and try to type it in, they would be hit with a please confirm, please authenticate message. And that message would only appear on another device that you had. So it would be your iPhone sitting in California that would get the little, here's your confirmation thing. And the hacker in Eastern Europe wouldn't be able to get it. So it makes it really, really hard for anybody to be able to break into an account, even if they get the password. So I use it, for everything, for Facebook, for Google, for Apple, for Twitter, all of that. Every time you hear about somebody's Twitter account being broken into or Facebook account being broken into, they don't have two-factor authentication.
Gary, what happens if you don't have
That's just not happening if they have it.
Sorry, what happens if you don't have an iPhone or an iPad? You only got a Mac.
It works on the Mac too.
So, but in other words, it sends it back to the Mac. Is what it's doing then, right?
Yeah, your Mac is a authenticated device.
Okay.
So say you have 2 Macs, you have an iMac and you have your MacBook. But say you just bought the iMac, right? You've got your MacBook, you just bought the iMac, you log in for the first time, it says, please authenticate. You look on your MacBook and it says, hey, an iMac sitting in Orange County, California wants to log in. And you're like, oh, that's me. And it says, here's the code. And then you type it in on your computer. If somebody in Romania does it, you'll get a little notice on your MacBook that says, an iMac in Romania wants to do it. Is this you? And you hit, no, it is not. And that person can't get in.
Gary, how do we get people to, or how do we get websites that don't use two-factor authentication to start using two-factor authentication?
Well, there's not too much we can do. The big ones really all use it. The ones that don't might be like, say, maybe your online bank. But a lot of them now, I mean, I'd say in the last year, I've just seen so many add it. A lot of times they add it and they don't want to burden their customers with it just yet, but it's there. Like if you go to like the password section, they'll be like, sign up for our two-factor authentication. So it's like they're not announcing it. They're not trying to push everybody to do it yet. But if you want to be extra secure, you can do it.
Gary?
And then, of course, you can always email them and say, hey, I'm up for two-factor when you guys are ready to move to it.
Yeah, I wanted to actually add to that question, and that is that several of the sites with two-step authentication have the ability to call a phone number rather than send a text. And so for people who don't have smartphones, the home phone could still be an authentication for that. The question I had was, what do you think of Google Authenticator as one of these two-step alternatives?
Yeah, I use that for Google. So Google Authenticator is an app that you can get on your iPhone that you actually, instead of getting a text, you actually run the app and it shows you a number, and the number changes every minute, and you enter that number in. And the cool thing is that software developers can actually hook into that. So you can use it just for Google like I do, but another site, like say an online bank, could say, hey, instead of generating our own codes, go to Google Authenticator and use the Google Authenticator code. So you enter that code in that you see in your Google Authenticator app, and you do that on the bank website, and then the bank website is going to check with Google and say, the person claiming to be this just entered this code in, and Google says, yeah, that's the code that person should have had, so they're the right person. So it's a good way to do it. It's there's so many ways, like you pointed out. You can get phone calls, you can get text messages, you can get emails. There are two-factor by email. I've seen that done. One of my online banks does that, where it's actually one of my online credit cards does that, where I can get an email sent to me when I try to log on. So it's going to do a two-factor through email. So there's all sorts of different ways for two-factor. There's even by postal mail, which of course isn't good for logging on right then. But like I had to just confirm some sort of government tax thing, and to sign up for an account, they needed to mail me a postcard with a PIN on it. And that's a way to confirm that I'm the person at that address. The site Nextdoor does that too, where if you want to sign up for a neighborhood at Nextdoor, they actually send you a postcard to confirm that you actually live at the address you say you're going to live at. So a lot of different ways to do two-factor.
Cool.
Oh, sorry. The only other point I wanted to add is when we've had, I'm a colleague of Bruce in Washington Apple Pie, a DC Metro area mug.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, with one thing that I recommended in one of the meetings is for people to, in their password manager or otherwise, keep track of the sites that they were using these separate login security things for. So much of this has kind of estate legacy ramifications that if something happens to me and I want people to be able to access my stuff. So because I use 1Password, what I do with all the logins is just put a tag in for the login, if I'm using a two-factor authentication and the method of it, just so at some point, if somebody needs to get into my stuff, they can.
Yeah, it's a good point. I use 1Password as well, and I do the same thing. My wife knows where she could find my 1Password master password. So if something should happen to me, and instead of all my accounts being lost because nobody knows where those passwords are, there is somebody that can actually figure out how to get into them. So, and
excuse me.
So I wanted to tie that into a little bit to what I mentioned before about phishing, which is the simplest way for somebody to get your password. They just ask you for it.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Before you go on to phishing, I've
Sure.
got a question about 1Password.
Yeah.
Right now, I use Keychain, and by the way, I have never, when I've tried to, sign up for a new account, never gotten a message from Keychain suggesting a password. So I must have something set wrong.
Yeah,
But-
your Safari, check in there in the autofill and password preferences.
Okay. In any case, right now, I've got so many passwords in Keychain, it's ridiculous. There's hundreds in there, and most of them are identified with weird identification that I have no idea where it is. Like for Adobe, there must be 15 different things in there for, I guess, functions of Adobe that I don't even know about. If I were to get something like 1Password, would I have to go to each of the sites that are in my Keychain and manually change my password with them, or will 1Password go through and automatically do everything to insert whatever it's going to use as the passwords for the various accounts?
Well, so the great thing about both Keychain and 1Password is you change a password. So say you log on to Adobe's, I know what you mean by Adobe having a bunch of different passwords, because there's like stock photography, there's Creative Cloud, there's forums and stuff. And so you say you go to the Creative Cloud site and you go to their change password thing. You decide you're going to change your password. Both Keychain and 1Password will see when you've changed the password and will say, would you like to update the password for the site? So they kind of follow along as you change passwords for sites and update themselves. So is that kind of what your question was, or?
Yeah, but does that work when there's a the double authentication type?
Oh yeah, well the two-factor authentication, you still have your regular password. So it would work with that. But the two-factor, the second factor, is not something that gets saved because it's a one-time thing. Like when you get a text or, it's something you look at in the app, that code it gives you is just that one-time use.
Yeah, and it times out after 2 or 3 minutes too, doesn't it?
Yeah, usually there's a pretty short leash on that time, of which it makes it more secure.
Oh, I see. So that's what when I get into that thing, when they send me the email with the code on it, and I have to go back and manually enter that code to get
Yes. So actually, sometimes what happens with different websites is you'll get a code for that second factor. You enter that in, and something like 1Password or Keychain will say, do you want to save this? And if it's a second factor, then no, you don't, because that code is never going to be good again. So you say, no. I run into this with that same online bank where when I enter that code I get in my email, it says, you want to save this? I'm like, no, I don't want to save it because that code is going to change all the time. But the main password, that stays the same. So it's just something to keep in mind on a case-by-case basis, depending upon how they've coded the website or service or whatever it is.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Gary,
Yeah.
can you comment on both Keychain and 1Password give you a cloud option to save and sync? What's your opinion on the safety of those options?
Well, okay, so here's how I've done it with 1Password, because I've been using 1Password since before they had that cloud option and since before Keychain existed. What I do with 1Password is I save that locally, but I actually save it to Dropbox. And they actually have this as an option. So I'm using Dropbox, and it's saving my encrypted database to Dropbox. And then on my other Macs and on my iPhone and iPad, I give it that option. I say, I've saved it to Dropbox. Here's where it is. So the file is not on their service. It's in my Dropbox account. So for somebody to get to it, first of all, they'd have to get into my Dropbox account, which is a vulnerability, right? They could get into my Dropbox account some way. But even if they did, it's an encrypted file. So they couldn't actually break into it. So I feel perfectly safe putting my encrypted database of passwords into my Dropbox account and sharing it that way. 1Password doesn't have any of my data. It's on my Dropbox account. Now for iCloud, I am using iCloud's storage of it. That's also encrypted. So it is up there in my iCloud account, stored in the the iCloud keychain, but it's encrypted. So, how safe is that? Well, knowing encryption, I think it's extremely safe. I think it's it's a non-issue. So that's what I do.
Cool.
So, and a lot of this, when you think of ways people can break into your accounts, encryption, you have this encrypted database and it's stored here, and they could break into 1Password or LastPass, or maybe they break into iCloud, all this stuff. One of the things about it is they're all really complex, and it's not like they're impossible, but they're really complex. And we live in a world where people will just voluntarily give people their passwords. So a lot of times, you think of a crime syndicate somewhere in the world trying to get passwords, and you think of them sitting around a board meeting and saying, okay, I have this plan to break into Apple servers and decrypt all their passwords. And it's going to take tons of computers and manpower, and we're going to have to get some PhDs in computer science, and we're going to have to do all this. and it's going to cost this much money. And another guy says, I'm just going to spam 1,000, a million people and ask them for their passwords. And I'm probably going to get 10,000 passwords and it's going to cost me nothing. So, that's phishing. It's easy. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of this high tech stuff doesn't happen, because it's so easy to get passwords. You don't have to worry about it that much. Here's a whole bunch of examples of emails on the iPhone and the Mac. Here's one that says, account alert. Your account's been locked for security reasons. Click on this link here. Then looks like the real link, appleid.apple.com, Apple ID unlock. You can see it right there. If you ignored this message, your account will be deleted within 3 days. So you better pay attention. Here's another one that's saying you requested to change your password and it's now locked. So you have to click this button. Look, if you don't verify your account within 24 hours, we'll disable it. These are all very threatening. And I'm sure if you get one of these, blood pressure goes up, right? It's like, oh my, what's going on? Here's one that actually even shows you your email address. And people get really, excited when they see this because it's got your, and I blanked it out here, but it could come with your real email address in it. But of course, it's being sent to your email inbox. So why wouldn't it have your real email address in it? And it looks like it goes to the real Apple site. Another one, look, your payment method was declined. You probably didn't even buy anything, but it's suddenly telling you your payment method was declined. Sounds like something you should look into by clicking on this link. Apple's identified a fraud order for $29. You better sign in and figure out what it is. Here's a receipt you just get out of the blue for something that you purchased from Venezuela. Oh, you better check that out. And there's a link in there at the bottom. Here's something for $420,000 or $42,000. Hard to say. That seems like something very important and you should pay attention to. Now, what all these have in common is they're all fake. Every one of those was fake. And a lot of them were really obviously fake because they had words that were spelled wrong and they were ridiculous in lots of different ways. But not one of those showed their hand by actually giving you a domain name or a link that looked like it was fake. They all looked real. And the important thing is to remember, when you get any email that looks like this, don't click on the links in the emails because it's easy to fake those links. The text in the link is different than the link itself. So just like on a website, you may see like, the word important underlined in blue and you click on it and it goes to a website, you can change that word to look like a website. Apple.com is the word and link to xyz.com instead. So clicking on a link in emails is bad news. And you'll notice that when you get a real email alerting you to something, a lot of times they don't even include a link. They'll just tell you, please log into your online banking account or please log into your Amazon account or something like that. But even so, it's pretty easy if you get an email, say from eBay telling you something's up with your account, to ignore the link there and just go to ebay.com yourself, go to your account and see if there's any warnings or messages in there. Never rely on your eye to check it out. They always can deceive you. Even if you click on the link and you look and you say, oh, it says apple.com, and you think you can recognize a fake link. You think you would recognize it if it's at apple.com.xyz.net and say, that's really xyz.net. They're trying to trick me. But do that 100 times and you may only catch it 99 out of 100. So never just rely on your eye because they're trying to do things to trick you into thinking you're going to the website. Of course, what they're trying to do here is they're trying to get you to go to what looks like the real website and then type in your ID and password. And at that point, they've gotten your ID and password and they don't care what happens after that. Matter of fact, a common technique is to show you your bank account, like, okay, your Citibank account's been compromised, please log on. You click on the link. It looks like your Citibank login page. You type in your ID and password. Now they have your ID. The bad guys have your ID and password. And they immediately redirect you back to the Citibank site. So now you're like, oh, that's weird. I guess I must have mistyped my password. It's just asking me again. You type in your password. Now you're logged into Citibank. Everything looks fine. And you think, well, maybe I wasn't tricked. And you forget that you actually had to type your password in twice. And the first time, that was the fraud. So it's important to not rely on that. Type in, go to the website yourself if you suspect, or, just ignore those emails if you can easily identify that they're wrong. Don't rely. A lot of people say, oh, you can always tell they're fakes because they have these spelling errors in it. I mean, you can look back at some of these and like, look, the money amount is $420,00. It's not even using, is at $420, but it's using the European comma instead of period. Did they forget a zero? There's all sorts of just stuff in here. If you look at some of this, has like spelling mistakes and just really odd terminology for things. And some of them are point on. So anyway, don't rely on, sorry about that. Get through those slides. Don't rely on spelling errors because sometimes they're easy to spot and other times they're perfectly done phishing emails. So there is one way to keep completely safe from this, and that is the same technique you use for strong passwords. It's password managers like 1Password, LastPass, or using the Keychain. The way they protect you from phishing is computers take everything literally, right? So they don't have just your ID and your password. They also have the website. So the website could be, say, adobe.com, for logging onto your Adobe site, Adobe account. And if you go to a site that's adobe.com.xyz.net, right? Then that's not Adobe. That's a fake one. It's, Keychain or 1Password is going to look and say, I don't have the password for that site. And no matter what you do with 1Password, it's not going to give you your Adobe password for that site because it's like, this isn't Adobe, right? It's not fooled at all. It sees it as a completely different website. Even though your eye is tricked, the password manager is not tricked. And it's just simply not going to associate the password with this fake website. So using password managers actually is the best protection against phishing. Even if all this other stuff fails you and you're tricked, it's late at night, you get an email, you're not thinking, you click, the site looks perfect, the password manager will prevent you from ever using your password there. So that basically is, are there any questions before I move on about phishing? Cool. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward, but it's definitely the biggest threat out there right now, and the one that we're all constantly being attacked at.
Yeah, can you tell me which one is the best password manager today?
I don't think that, I think between LastPass and 1Password, they're about equal. They compete head to head with each other. Yeah. So they're matching each other pretty well. I've been using 1Password for so long that I can't remember. I mean, probably since they started. So I've just been using that. I think for most users, you could just use iCloud Keychain now, and you'd be
Gary?
fine. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. What do you think of Dashlane?
I haven't used it, but I assume it's up to par with the others.
It's got a kind of a nicer interface, and one of the useful features in it is the ability to actually go out and automatically update passwords on certain listed sites they have. And this, I think, is a hard data thing to do because every website has a different way of having users change their passwords, and they have to learn the root for each of them. But it's a useful thing, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty useful. I don't know. I haven't looked to see if 1Password or LastPass has anything like that. That's pretty cool. The one advantage to 1Password, LastPass, or I assume Dashlane, I think they're all cross-platform. So I'm pretty much all Apple now, so it doesn't really matter for me. But there are people that have a Mac and have an Android phone, or they have a Windows PC and an iPhone, or maybe they have all Apple stuff except they've got one Windows computer for gaming, or they use a Windows computer at work or something. In that case, it's hard to use iCloud Keychain because you can access the stuff, but it's not as easy. So using something like 1Password is a great cross-platform solution. Also, things like 1Password, LastPass, and Dashlane have great features like extra little secure notes and things like that. I mean, what happens when you take out a safety deposit box at the bank, right? And you have to remember the number of the safety deposit box. That's not an online password, but it is something you want to put kind of in that same location, right? So, you know, 1Password and the like, you can say, I just want to create a secure note and call it my safety deposit box number or something like that. So, you know, I store family, you know, passport numbers and things like that all inside of 1Password because it's very convenient. So there's some nice features to those, but I think a lot of people, you could still do those things using Keychain, but it's a little nicer when you do them in those other apps.
Okay.
So cool. So, and you know, one thing I haven't pointed out about passwords is the 1Password to always think about when you know you think about being compromised is your email address password. So no matter what account you use, whether it's iCloud or Gmail or Yahoo or whatever it is, if somebody got access to your email account, think of what they could do. They could go to, say, maybe you have an online bank account, and they could try to log in with your email address there. They don't know your password, but they could go and hit that button saying, I forgot my password. And what the bank is going to do is email you a little link to set up a new password. But if they have your email account, they can log on, check your email, get that link, and then use it to create a new password for your bank account. They can even go into your email account then and delete that email so you don't notice anything is wrong. I mean, how often do you log into your bank, right? I might maybe do it a couple times a month. So it might be a few days before I notice something's wrong with my bank account, whereas my email account I'm checking all the time. So your email account is kind of a little window into lots of other accounts because of that whole, you know, please reset my password link kind of thing. So always be wary of that and of your email account. And if somebody were to compromise your email account, think about all of the accounts that use that email account for recovery like that. And the fact that they might change those. Like a technique might be to log on to your bank account and not only change your password, but go in and you have like security questions, and it'll be like a security question, what was your first car? And they'll change that from, you know, to Ford or something. And then you go in, you change your password and you think you're safe, but they know the answer to your security question for what was the model of your first car. So now 3 months later, they come back, they try to log into your bank account. They don't know the password, but they do know the answer to your security question because you didn't think to look there. So anytime your passwords are compromised, think about those security questions if they're still using them at that site, and make sure you check those or reset those as well. Anyway.
That's where two-factor authentication makes a lot of sense for something like that.
Yeah, if you have two-factor, pretty much most of those sites have gotten rid of those security questions at that point because they are extremely a big vulnerability, right? It's much easier to guess the model of your first car than to guess a random password. Matter of fact, you try that 100 times and you're probably going to get into a couple of accounts because how many models of cars are there, you know? Okay. So let's switch gears here and talk a little bit about malware. How are we doing for time here?
You're good, Gary, as long as you need.
Yeah. So, you know, yeah, so malware is simpler than passwords. Macs are pretty safe from malware, but not invulnerable. But I've come up with 3 simple rules to follow to keep your Mac safe from malware. I follow these rules, and if you follow them, there shouldn't be any way to get infected with anything. And they're pretty basic and pretty obvious when you think about them, but you just got to be diligent in following them. So the first rule is keep your Mac updated. So Apple is always issuing updates, and just about every update's got some security updates in it, whether it's a massive upgrade like from Sierra to High Sierra, or a minor like a 0.1 or 0.2 upgrade. Sometimes they're so minor they don't even have numbers. They'll just be like security updates, and there'll be little minor things. You always keep these updates going. That'll protect you from a lot. And Apple does these updates all the time. They're really fast and really good at doing these. Matter of fact, one of the reasons I tell people that they don't need antivirus software is I look at every time there's an exploit that comes out, and I try to see, okay, an exploit was discovered this morning. When is Apple going to come out with a patch for it? And a lot of times it's later that day. Sometimes it's the next day. And then I also try to watch the antivirus companies. And a lot of times they're slower to come out with that update than Apple is. And of course, if Apple comes out with it at the system level, it doesn't really matter if, you know, the antivirus software came out with it. Sometimes Apple comes out with them before you even know about it. Matter of fact, a lot of the time they do, right? An exploit comes out and it turns out Apple says, yeah, we patched that 6 months ago. So keep it up to date, but not just the system software. It's important to update all of the software on your computer, because you may not think of all that software as being something that has to do with security. For instance, say you've got some image editing app, right? It just edits images. You could think, what could be, you know, a security issue with that? But that software is built on top of libraries, and those libraries are built on top of other libraries. And those libraries could include all sorts of things, networking functions and all sorts of things that could have security vulnerabilities. And what happens is those libraries are updated all the time to patch these security vulnerabilities. And when a developer, like the developer of image editing software, gives a small minor update, they're pulling the latest libraries and using that and wrapping it up into their new update. So a image editing software update may just be like a new little tool or a new little bug fix, but it may also include some important security updates way down deep that keep your Mac safe. So update all your software and update your Mac. That's step one. 2 is to download software only from sites you trust. Now, just before I started talking, we were talking about the Mac App Store. So Greg was talking about that. It's some great points. It's easy to keep things updated when you're using the Mac App Store. It's also very safe to buy things through the Mac App Store because it's this gated developer community. It's like if you were going to rob a bank and there was one bank where you could walk right in, walk right up to the teller and then state your business, and another bank where you actually had to go talk to a security guard at the door, give him your ID, they take a picture of you, and then they let you go to the teller. Which bank are you going to rob, right? It's the same kind of thing with the Mac App Store. All the developers have to fill in all these credentials before they can get an app in the Mac App Store. So if you're going to try to distribute something bad, you're not going to try to do it through the Mac App Store. You're going to try to do it somewhere else where you can get away with it. Also, Apple does have the ability to pull things out of the Mac App Store when if something bad's been discovered. And I don't think they've really ever used it, but they can do that. Not just pull it from the store, but actually disable it on your computer. They certainly can pull it from the store easily enough. So much safer to buy from the Mac App Store than somewhere else. Now that said, there are plenty of places that you can go to where you can trust the developer. For instance, like Adobe and Microsoft are huge software companies that have been around for a long time. And as long as you're actually buying from them, not from some fake site, that you can buy Microsoft Word, you can buy Adobe Photoshop. And they're not in the Mac App Store, but you're perfectly safe buying them from Adobe and Microsoft. Anybody else? It's really easy to do research. So you hear of some other app and you can't get an app like it in the Mac App Store. It's highly recommended. And you want to check it out before you download. Just do a search. Search with the name of the company or the name of the app. Search with terms like malware, reviews, all sorts of things. The bad guys pop up all over the place with people complaining about them, warning you not to download. And the good guys show up with oh, this is a great app, I use this, our company uses it, that kind of thing. So it's really easy to actually do a reputation search online and at least rule out a lot of software right away. But when in doubt, think about what you're downloading. A lot of times, I've talked to people and they said, I downloaded this thing and now I have adware on my Mac or whatever. I'm like, well, what was it that you downloaded? And they name something. And I'm like, was that really that important that you wanted to risk, by downloading from this site you've never heard of, this app you've never heard of, and it just did that? It gave you coupons or some neat little clock on your computer or something like that. Think about it before you download, and always check the Mac App Store for something that's similar. So that's basically the second part. And the third part is stay informed. So Apple is so scrutinized, as we all know, right? More than any other tech company. So much so that when there's problems that come out, even if the problem's with Samsung phones or with Windows PCs, the headlines say it's an Apple issue. So if you just go to one of these websites like Mac Rumors, Mac Observer, Cult of Mac, I'm sure you're familiar with those. If there's ever any problem, they're going to be talking about it. So if you just make it part of your weekly routine to just kind of check up on things, you can see if there's an issue out there. And being informed is really important. And not just being informed that there is an issue, but actually reading about it, because, you know, like with some of the recent stuff, like with the root password vulnerability from last month, I'm amazed by how many people just didn't read past the headlines and made some assumptions about them. And it really wasn't much of an issue. And even now with things like Spectre and Meltdown, those vulnerabilities, you know, they seem scary just with the headlines, but if you read a little bit about them, you find out there's really not much to do except to update your software and not worry too much about it. So staying informed is important. If you're informed, if your software is updated, and if you only download software from sites you trust, then, you know, you're going to be 99.9% protected from any kind of malware on your Mac. So any questions about that?
Oh, sounds good.
Good. All right. Well,
Going back to another,
Question.
yeah.
Yeah, Gary, there's a site that Jonathan mentioned in one of the meetings here on the East Coast the other day. And Jonathan, maybe you could refresh my memory as to what that site was, but this guy keeps a database or keeps track of what accounts have been hacked. And if you type in your email address or a username from a site, it will purport to tell you whether or not that account has been compromised. Jonathan, do you remember what site that was?
You know, Bruce, it reminds me that I owe the people who came to our last afternoon learners meeting last week the MailChimp recap, and that was one of the things that I was going to include. Yeah, Gary, let me know what you think. This is a site called haveibeenpawned.com. And it's a guy who, as Bruce just said, keeps a database of all emails that have been in circulation and gives the user, when you put in your email address, the hacks where your email address has shown up.
Mm-hmm.
And the little tutorial that I did with our group is look up your email address, and if you see that when a hack was revealed is newer than the last time you changed your password for that email address, go do it.
Yeah, no, I know about that site. Yeah, I mean, if I type my email address in, it lights up like a Christmas tree, because I've had the same email address since the beginning of the internet, and yeah, it's somewhat useful for kind of awareness, but most of the time, you know, if you're changing your passwords regularly or whatever, you know, it's not an issue. Like I can go and say the 2014 Yahoo exploit, you know, it'll show up, but I've of course changed my password on my Yahoo account since then. So the fact that my email address shows up really isn't something that is important. So yeah, it can, as long as you realize what it is, it's pretty good. I would say that if you're thinking, oh, okay, Home Depot's accounts were just compromised, I wonder if my account was compromised. Instead of going to that site, I would just go right away to Home Depot and change your password. You know, there's no point finding out, because even if it said, nope, your email address doesn't show up in the database, I would say, just to be safe, I'm going to change it anyway. And I would just go and change it. But it is good for making people aware, because a lot of people walk around and think that, oh, no, my stuff isn't, I'm fine. And just showing them that may wake them up and get them to say, okay, I need to pay attention to all this password security stuff. Tell me again about strong passwords. Tell me again about unique passwords. Tell me again about password managers. And if it gets people to that level where they're paying attention, then it's a good thing.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much. You know, folks, I'm going to have to take off now, but this was just terrific. Gary, I will definitely connect with you, because I think it would be great to kind of get you in front of our pie group.
Yeah, love to.
Hey, thanks for everyone for sponsoring this. This is my first exposure to it. And Bruce, thanks so much for alerting me to it.
No problem. I think someone else had a question, Bart or somebody, before we move on, or a comment.
yeah, I've got a quick question. That's been puzzling me for a long, long time. I've enabled in iCloud the keychain on both my computer and in my iPhone 5S. On the iPhone 5S, I see no physical evidence that there's actual sharing of the keychain going on, because I still have to put in passwords for places that the computer I don't have to put them in. And there's no icon or anything else on my iPhone that I can go to look at the keychain. Am I doing something wrong?
A lot of times, I mean, it should appear a lot of times just automatically. But sometimes when you actually go to type in a password, on the keyboard at the bottom, at the top of the keyboard, there's a little autofill button. So that's one thing to look for. But it could be, it sounds like you may not have iCloud Keychain set up. So you may want to check on both iOS and on your Mac, you know, all your settings for iCloud and for iCloud Keychain and in Safari for that. Just kind of do a complete audit of all of that.
Yeah, Gary,
I don't use Safari. Excuse me, I don't use Safari. I use Chrome most of the time. Would that make a difference?
Sure.
Well, yeah, the keychain's only going to work through Safari. Chrome is its own Google system for that.
Hey, Gary,
so I have to convert to Safari if I want it to work on the iPhone.
Yes, because you're using Safari on the iPhone.
Okay, that answers the question. Thanks.
However, Bart, if you used OnePass or LastPass, it would work on both.
Okay, because I'm seriously considering that now, real seriously.
Cool. All right, so there's just one last thing I want to talk about, and I've talked about other things as well, but you know, the third part I talked about was data loss. This is really important because there's still people that don't do this. I'm sure most of you do, you know, just doing a backup. It protects you from so much. It protects you from, say you do get a piece of malware on your Mac and your data's gone or your computer's locked up or whatever, a backup will save you. Say if your iCloud account was compromised and somebody gets rid of all your files, having a backup will save you. But a backup saves you from things that are far more common, like losing your MacBook, somebody stealing it, a flood or a fire, you know, destroying your iMac. You know, just, you know, something breaking, your hard drive breaking, you know, it happens. Backups save you from those very common things. Having a time machine backup is so important. Everybody should have one. Time machine isn't just backing up everything you've got. It's doing versions of it as well. So it protects you from something that's even more common than the physical problems, which is human error. You accidentally deleted a file, or you accidentally deleted some text inside of a word processing document you're working on. You didn't realize it until after you saved. Time Machine not only lets you see the last version that you had when you did your last backup, but allows you to go back in time. So if you deleted a paragraph from your autobiography that you're writing in Pages, and you did it a month ago, and you think, oh, I should have, you know, not done that, you can go back to a version of that document from 2 months ago and pull it up, for instance. If you deleted something, say you delete something, a few weeks go by, you've backed up since then, it's a regular clone backup where it's just cloning your drive, you're not going to have that file anymore because it wasn't on your hard drive the last time you backed up. But with Time Machine, it would be, because you could go back in that folder to last month to when that file existed there. So Time Machine prevents human errors as well as physical problems. And it's, you know, it's very important to use. And I still hear from people all the time that have a problem that would have been saved by a backup. Somebody was keeping a journal for years in a document, and the document got corrupted and they lost it. And I said, just go to your backup. And of course, I've never done backups. Years and years worth of a journal gone, you know, because they didn't do a backup. So I actually do two backups. I do my Time Machine backup, and my second backup is off-site. It's an online backup, because what happens if there was like a flood or somebody broke into my house or a fire or something like that, and destroys both the Time Machine drive and my computer? An online backup, I use Backblaze. For a while, I use CrashPlan. and it's for me as somebody that works on my Mac all the time, and my whole, career is there in my data files. Having a second backup that's an online backup that's offsite is really important. And I also want to caution against using iCloud as a backup or relying on iCloud as a backup, because I hear people say, oh, I don't do Time Machine backups because I'm just using iCloud Drive. So it's all backed up on Apple servers. And it does provide some level of security. Like, for instance, you have a MacBook, the MacBook is stolen, but everything was an iCloud Drive. You get a new MacBook, you sign into iCloud, and all your files are there. So in that way, it acts like a great backup. But if you delete a file, say 2 months ago, and then realize you deleted that file, your iCloud Drive is not going to have that file anymore, because it only has the most recent stuff. It has a kind of recently deleted folder, but if it's too old, it won't be there. So that's not good. If you make a mistake, like you go into a file and you change it in some way, and you realize I shouldn't have done that, you can't jump to an older version of it, because iCloud is just storing that stuff there. And what's worse is you can make a mistake and it goes across all your devices. So you have a MacBook and an iMac, and you change a file in a way you shouldn't, it's going to update, of course, an iCloud Drive, which means it's updated on your other Mac as well. So it's kind of the opposite of a backup. The problem you've created now propagates all over the place. So iCloud's great, and it can save you from a lot of situations, but it's not a substitute for a backup. So still do a Time Machine backup, even if you're using iCloud as a way of keeping your keeping data loss down. So that's basically it for backups. Basically, the one thing about backups is do them. That's all. And make sure that you, if you're using a MacBook, that you're either using a time capsule or a external drive hooked up to a router to do your backup, or you're hooking up that external drive on a daily or several times a week basis to make that backup happen, so that it happens on a regular basis. So any questions about backups? Any questions in general about any of this security stuff? I mean, that's like I've covered all the I must cover stuff now. So
I have a question.
Talk about security in general.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I get a lot of phishing, and I do a copy of them. Is there somebody to send them to, or do they care? Would they follow up on them?
I would just delete them. Sometimes they do care, but is it really worth your time? Because the thing is that they're one-offs. They're all one-offs. Wherever it's being sent from, whatever technique they're using, they're going to do something different the next time. There's plenty of people that will hit the spam button or whatever, and if they're using Gmail or something, they have plenty of samples of all this. They can try to stop phishing and other types of spam. My feeling is that our time as individuals is probably a little too precious to worry about trying to get it to the proper authorities, that kind of thing. I just delete them.
Yeah. Secret is just to recognize them as spam and then get rid of them.
Yep. Always never give the benefit of the doubt. Just always assume everything you get is spam or whatever. And then, the job of the email is to try to prove otherwise. Oh, this is just an email from a friend telling me how they're doing, or this is, an actual newsletter that I subscribe to or something like that. But otherwise, I look at everything with suspicion as soon as I get it. And I never click on a link in any of them.
Yeah, great, Gary. I've subscribed to you for years, and so keep up the good work.
Oh, great, thank you.
Wait a minute, I have a question.
I was just going to say, anybody who wants a question, you may or may not be muted. So if you need to ask a question, make sure you unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay. Sometime back, several years ago, Robert gave us a suggestion, which I really liked a lot, about using a portion of your password as standard, but you put in front of it or after it some other identifying comment as if it was the bank that you would say BOA and then put in the rest of your standard thing like that. Is that still safe, or do you really, or is it just best to totally go to the random passwords?
Yeah, I would just totally go with the random passwords. There's really no reason to do anything like that. It only makes the password a little bit weaker. So no, if you're using a password manager anyway, no reason to do it. Just use the random password.
Okay, thank you.
Gary?
Yeah.
Two quick, well, one's not quick. One question, 1Password on the iPhone.
Mhm.
To use it with the browser, it seems to have its own browser built into it. Is there a way to get it to work with Safari on the iPhone?
Yeah, well, if I have to use it, I usually just copy and paste. There's the copy and paste functionality in there.
Yeah,
And then they've got a lot of, Password has a software development kit. So some apps can actually use 1Password, like recognize that you have it installed and kind of pull the password from there.
On the
I
iPhone?
use both iCloud Keychain and 1Password, both of them, because when iCloud Keychain first came out, first modernized to be a replacement for 1Password, really, I didn't switch right away. I thought, I should switch, right? Because I'm a Mac guy, and I should always use like what most people are using. But I didn't switch right away, and I noticed that I could use both without really any problem, because if I used 1Password to suggest a new password, iCloud Keychain said, "Hey, do you want to update your password?" I was like, "Sure." If I used iCloud Keychain to suggest a password, 1Password said, "Hey, do you want to store this password?" So I just started not caring and just using whichever one I was using. So all my passwords are both in iCloud Keychain and in 1Password. So when I'm on my iPhone, iCloud Keychain kind of takes over because it's right there up front in Safari, and all my passwords are there. So it's kind of for the easiest way to do it, I'm just using both. And I thought, hey, if I ever run into an issue where it's like, it's a real pain to use both, then I would stop. I never run into an issue. So it's been years now that I've just been using both to do it. And mainly it makes using the iPhone easier because iCloud Keychain jumps right in there with those passwords in Safari. I do have a couple of old accounts I never put in iCloud Keychain because it just never got around to it. I don't use them that often. And I do have to go with 1Password, and I just do the little copy and paste thing. But, it's not, it doesn't take up that much extra time that I'm really going to compromise my security by trying to work around it or anything.
Okay, thanks. The second thing, and this one has to do with coincidence, and it's phishing.
Yeah.
I have 3 examples in the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
Where I'll give you the one example. My granddaughter, I put apps on my grandkids' iPads and things at times.
Mm-hmm.
And at times they've known the password to it. So my granddaughter sent me a message on iMessage saying she was doing something and she needed the password to the account. And I wrote back to her and said, well, go talk to your dad. I live in Australia and they live in the States.
Yeah.
So when they're at home, I don't give them the password over their
Sure.
internet.
Yeah.
Literally the next day I get a message, and it was definitely a phishing thing, saying an in-app purchase had occurred for $34.27.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know it was phishing, and I sort of panicked, and I called, or I messaged my son and said, you need to check your daughter's things and see if she accidentally ordered something, did an in-app purchase. It turned out she didn't. It was just phishing.
Yeah.
A couple days, or since then, I also did a small order on eBay, a $6 item. And literally the next day, I get a phishing message of attack from PayPal.
Mm.
And there's a third example, again, a different one. Are these literally just coincidences?
Yeah, they happen a lot. It's really interesting. I just read a book. I wish I could remember the name of it. I think it's called The Improbability Principle, where it talks about how, our minds we can see these coincidences happening. I see this is something that phishing relies on a lot, like for instance, I got an email from somebody saying, I got a phishing attack, but it claimed to be from Navy Federal Credit Union. And I happen to have an account there. How did they know I had an account there? And I thought, it's probably just a coincidence. So I looked in my spam folder, and sure enough, I found an email, supposedly from Navy Federal Credit Union. And I don't have a bank account there. So then I was able to tell them, what happened? They emailed everybody, or at least millions of people. And they're just interested in the people that the people that don't have it saw it as spam right away. But the people that did have it said, well, wait a minute, maybe this is legitimate. The same thing goes with, say, eBay. It's like people that don't have eBay accounts just ignore it. People that do, people that maybe just did something with eBay are more likely to think that, oh, wait a minute, well, I just did something with eBay yesterday, and then I get this phishing attack. Whereas if you haven't done something with eBay in, say, 6 months, you may have just ignored that email like right away. So they do this stuff often enough that, yeah, it comes up all the time where they're trying to get people, thinking that it's a coincidence. Lots of scams do that. There's scams now where they'll call and claim to be like, oh, we've got your grandson in prison here and he needs bail money. And, they call 100 people and 100 people say, I don't have any grandkids. And then suddenly somebody says, oh my God, I do have a grandson that I haven't talked to in 5 years. This probably relates to that. And they're looking for that coincidence, right? So it's a lot of reliance on that coincidence there in, and with your examples, I don't see any reason it's not a coincidence. It's just that we're all online long enough. There's enough of us that eventually run into these things.
Okay. Stop being so paranoid.
Hey, Gary, I'm trying to remember. I know it's Steve Gibson, but I can't remember his website that you can go to if you've got a favorite password that you've been using, or if you want to check out the validity of how secure 1Password or LastPass is, or even Keychain password is. You go to, I forget what his security site is. Security Now or something like that. What is it?
grc.com.
Yeah.
Gibson Research.
And then you can click in the your suggested password and see how many days, weeks, months, minutes, whatever it will take to break it on the average.
Right. It's important not to use it with a real password, but it is fun to use it with a.
Right. But if you want to try those Apple suggested ones, right?
Yeah, just something that it's like, hey, I've been using this password for years. I just changed it. I wonder how secure that was all those years. Then you can get a shock and find out that, for 10 years you've been using a Facebook password that wasn't secure at all.
Pretty scary.
Yeah, definitely.
Very scary.
Gary, before you go, tell us about your website and how you got involved in all that and
Sure.
what started you on that. I mean, I think it's a marvelous website, and I think it's probably one of the most hidden features of the Mac universe is that there's a lot of websites similar to yourself that are out there that nobody even knows about.
Yeah. So I started macmost around 2006. I've been a Mac user since college, since the 80s, where I went to a college where they actually required everybody to buy a Mac. I had an Apple II before that. So I've been using Macs as a developer. I develop mobile games now, and I did websites and web-based games before. So I was doing things like that and desktop publishing and all, and I was just a Mac user. But I have a computer science degree, so I know the inner workings of a lot of it, and I just knew a lot about. I didn't have to work at it. I didn't have to, say I'm going to start, learning everything I can about Macs. It's just part of. It was like a hobby attached to what I did professionally, just knowing everything about Macs. I just love doing it. So around 2006, when video podcasting kind of started, I started a few shows, and one of them I started was macmost, and that's the one that kind of took off and had the longevity. And I developed it into a whole website, and 1,500 episodes in with all sorts of other content.
Why don't you show us your site, Gary?
What was that?
Show us your site.
Oh, yeah. Good idea. Oh, it's not going to do that. It's not going to take full screen, is it? Zoom isn't going to. I'll just do this.
It's fun. Zoom is a little funny about that.
Yeah. So macmost So basically, I do everything as video tutorials, and I try to do 5 a week on various topics. And I do touch on iPhone and iPad as well as Mac, though probably majority Mac. And it used to have ads, right? There used to be ads here on the right. And I basically, everything was just free and there were just ads. But online advertising isn't what it used to be, both in what it pays, but also in the quality of the ads. I hated having the ads on the site. It just bothered me every day. Like I go to my own site, just like I did now. Like you'd say, show me your site. And I'd go to it and I see the ads on the side and I'd cringe like, So about a little over a year ago, I decided to go with Patreon, which is a way people can,
Help you out.
contribute to a site, kind of like a PBS type of model, kind of sponsor the site. And I took the ads off the site. So that's great because now it's a totally ad-free site for everybody, not just the people who are supporting it. And that's great. And then another thing I started doing is people started to ask me for, do you have any books? Do you have any online courses? That kind of thing. So I created an online course and it was a big success. So I've been creating online courses ever since. I think for about 2 years now. I've been creating online courses. So that's another thing that I offer. But besides that, everything is free at the site. So the 5 videos a week, they're all short tutorials. And then I have this weekly newsletter. Most people who go to the site just basically get the newsletter, and then you have the newsletter come every Thursday morning, and it shows here are the 5 messages, the 5 tutorials I've done this week, and maybe a tip, and maybe a recommendation, and maybe a blog post, and whatever else I've done in the past
Gary,
week.
I don't think most people realize that's free. They don't have to pay anything for this. All they got to do is subscribe to the newsletter.
Yeah,
They
just
can
get your
always
email
go to your
address and you just
website,
get
if
the
they
newsletter.
subscribe to the newsletter, you basically get a synopsis of what your video tutorials are about.
Right. And it's a lot easier than, say, subscribing to the podcast, because all the videos go out on an iTunes podcast, but not many people access it that way. People get them on YouTube as well, since they're hosted at YouTube. But, then you get your little daily notifications. But the newsletter is great because it's just once a week, Thursday morning, you get, here are the 5 tutorials, and you can see which ones interest you. And here's any other items. And I summarize the news for the week and that kind of thing. And it's just a free email that anybody can subscribe to. So that's basically it. And I just enjoy, putting these videos together. I mess around with my Mac and discover new things, and I do videos on them. People ask me questions. There's a forum at macmost, and people ask questions. And sometimes those questions I turn into tutorials. And other times I just see people asking questions elsewhere, or people ask me questions in real life, or even events like this. And I'd say, oh, I should do a tutorial on that. That's a good idea. And then I'll do a tutorial on it. And that's how I get the ideas for the tutorials that are the main content at the site. So that's basically it. Something I enjoy doing. I still develop, most of my time is still spent developing websites and mobile apps and things like that. But, I'd say about half my time, maybe, with the online courses and all that, is devoted to macmost and things.
Outstanding. Well, let me tell you, everybody, people, if any of you have ever looked for tutorials or whatever it is, these are the classic ones I ever seen done, Gary. I mean, I like the little picture in the picture, so you at least know who you're talking to, and they're really concise. They're clear and point. And I'm at a point now where I'm trying to teach myself. I'm either using the iPad as a second screen, like with Duet or something like that, or I'm switching back and forth between the two. And the nice thing is you can pause it, you can go try it yourself, go back over there, pick up where you left off, back it up a little bit if you have to. You can't get any better than, as far as I'm concerned, the tutorial style that you put together.
And they're all, and everything going all the way back 10 years is archived at the site, and you can search. If you want iMovie tutorials, I've got by category, you can search and see like the most recent ones first. So it's just easy to, dive in and start learning some new things.
Everybody's muted right now. If you've got questions, go ahead and talk. Try not to talk.
Gary, I just wanted to say thank you very much, because you really made us think about passwords at a depth that I've never had to before. And I think that really is going to be beneficial for us.
Great. Exactly why I like talking about it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gary. It was very informative, and I've got some action items now that I'm going to take care of shortly after we get done.
Great.
Thanks,
Gary
Gary.
from Albuquerque, New Mexico, we appreciate you very much here too. Our leader, Bob Reed, introduced me to macmost when I first got my Mac. And I don't know what I would have done without you.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yeah, Gary, this has been, I really appreciate the fact that you were willing to take some time and spend with us. I mean, we've been struggling with this group. We still got some struggling spots going because our club was the oldest Mac club in Orange County, Southern California here for years. And about this time frame last year, we started realizing that even though we were getting a free meeting facility, the liability insurance was costing us more than we were taking in. And the decision pretty much was, well, you know, we don't have one time we had 400 members. We were down to about 100, of which about 40 showed up on a regular basis. And then I started thinking about some possibilities and looked into 2 or 3. And a friend of mine turned me on to Zoom, which was the most cost-effective way for us. And now we make this free to anybody who wants to join because we got enough still left in the treasury for another 4 or 5 years, providing that one of us doesn't croak in the meantime and do this. So I really appreciate whenever we can get anybody to talk or whatever, bring up a specific point. Like we've had a couple of vendors that are willing to do that. But nowadays, I remember the good old days when you actually used to get vendors to come out to your meeting clubs. And it's just not cost effective for people to do that anymore. Time is too precious and resources are too thin. And the online just seems like a great way because you had Bruce and Jeremiah, they're on the East Coast. And Janine, she's up in Oregon, and Bob and Linda are there in Texas or New Mexico, I should say. And so this is great. There's no reason this can't be. We're good up to 100 people, so there's no reason this can't be for anybody who wants to join us anytime.
Yeah, this is the first time I've done this because I've certainly done in-person meetings. You know, I'm in Denver, so from Fort Collins down to Colorado Springs, I've done some drives to meetings, and I've certainly done ones where I presented online to a group.
Right, I've seen you at Smug Mug before too.
Yeah.
As Bruce used to be a president at one time of Smug.
Yeah, so this is the first time I've actually presented to a group, and we were all online.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's a cool concept if I can just figure out the logistics of the stumbling around, but I'll get it figured out.
Yeah, no, I think it worked really well.
I do too.
Yeah.
Anybody got any questions out there for him while we still got him?
Yeah, Gary, one more. Are you familiar with Steve Gibson's Swirl project? And do you think there's any reality to it?
I know Steve. I'm familiar with Steve Gibson, but I'm not.
Hang on a second, Gary. I'm going to mute everybody, and then I'm going to mute everybody and unmute you because we were getting some great feedback there. Oh, Gary, go ahead and unmute yourself. Go ahead.
So I know of Steve Gibson. I actually met him once a long time ago. But I'm not familiar with that project he's got going on. I'll have to look into that.
Again, folks, if you want to talk.
Supposedly it's going to replace passwords.
Okay.
In certain things, but he's been working on it for so long. Not sure there's any reality to it.
Yeah.
Any other things you got going on that you can talk about, Gary, or any upcoming ideas or new products that you're aware of that we just haven't heard anybody mention yet?
Let's see. In terms of security, no. I mean, I think it's interesting. What Apple's been doing with the iPhones with Face ID. I've got an iPhone 10, so I've been using Face ID for a while.
How well is that working for you, by the way? We've only got one member that I know of that has it, Robert, who has it. He swears by it. He says it's phenomenal how well it works.
It worked really well, but there's some logistical things. Like, for instance, while driving, or I should say not while driving, while stopped at, a light while driving, I used to be able to reach down to my phone without taking my eyes off of Ford and
just touch the home button
there and unlock it so I could do something like change the music or whatever. Now I can't, I got to lift the phone up to my face. So it's a little awkward there. Also on a desk, it's kind of awkward because, if I have it now on my desk in front of me, and if I go to unlock it, my face is too steep of an angle away. So I have to either tilt the phone or do some awkward lean over the phone to do it. So I kind of miss Touch ID a little bit. I almost wish there were both, because what Face ID does really well is not having to think about it. I lift the phone up to use it and it unlocks because it sees me, which Touch ID, I still have to do that step of using my thumb. So it does what it does really well, but it introduces some new, issues with, on the desk, on the nightstand too, laying on the nightstand and you want to, check it, can't see your face because you're not looking directly at it. So I'm kind of mixed about it, but yeah, it's advantages and disadvantages. So we all resist change a little bit, and I guess I'm no different. Right. So kind of like,
well, what about change? I mean, I use the Hey Siri feature a lot, especially for phone calls and what time is it in the middle of the night, and change the music. I just got to get the syntax a little right, but yeah. I have to. That's a real useful feature when you're driving down the road and you've got it plugged in. Yes. To your stereo system or whatever, and to play the Carpenters or play jazz or whatever it is.
Yeah, I love using Siri as a DJ while driving, because you can ask for all sorts of things. Play me some jazz, play me whatever, and Siri. And if you don't like it, you can just skip to the next song, and you could just keep asking Siri. It's like having somebody sitting in the passenger seat next to you in the old days, and just say, just surprise me with some music on the cassette deck or something.
That'll teach me for saying, "Hey Siri."
Oh yeah.
Should have been "Hey Shlomo," like Leo Laporte says. All right, Gary. Well, I if you got any questions for us or anything, otherwise, I once again, I'd like to say from the bottom of my heart and for the group, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking your time to spend with us.
Great. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Guys, anybody else? Anything before he goes off to do something practical?
Cool. Well, you guys all have a good weekend.
Thank you very much, Gary. We appreciate your help.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary.
Sure. Thank you.
Have a good one. Talk to you later.
You too. Bye.